I still remember the chill that ran down my spine when that calendar invite hit my screen. Quick chat? My office 5:15 p.m. It came from Karen Whitmore, our new regional VP, just 2 hours after I closed the biggest deal in Silicon Pathway's history. A $2 million contract with FederalLogic Systems, a deal that took me 6 relentless months. Late nights, back-to-back presentations, and endless calls to build trust with a client everyone else had given up on. "Congratulations on FederalLogic," Karen said with a soft, polished smile. Her tone was sweet, but her eyes were sharp. Mark, our HR manager, sat beside her, fiddling with his tablet, avoiding my gaze. "Thanks," I replied, still buzzing from the win. Karen gave a tight nod. "About that." She slid a white envelope across the table. "We're letting you go. Effective immediately." I blinked. My stomach dropped. She launched into corporate speak performance concerns, poor alignment, lack of collaboration. I had just landed a $2 million contract, and I was being fired. Mark quietly nudged the termination papers toward me, still not making eye contact. I walked out holding a small box of my things, heart pounding. She had no idea what she just started. By the time I reached my car, the texts were already coming in. "What happened? Tell me this isn't real." "They fired you." Rain hammered my windshield as I drove home, stunned. Then came the message from Tom, my lead developer. 8 p.m., Harper's Pub. We're all meeting. When I walked in, my team, Tom, Aisha, Jake, Ron, Lena, and Marcus was already gathered. Their faces said it all. "She's been trying to erase you for months," Lena said, showing me email threads with my name mysteriously missing. "She told execs you were hard to work with," Jake added. "Right after you got promoted. But what Karen doesn't know," Tom leaned forward. "FederalLogic signed because of you. And that contract has a 90-day opt-out. I had insisted on that clause. A full refund, no questions asked, just in case. I never thought we'd need it. Now, it was my secret weapon." Back at my apartment in St. Paul, I kicked off my heels, poured a glass of Merlot, and opened my laptop. At 38, after 16 years in sales, I'd learned to keep receipts. A folder labeled Records sat on my desktop. Inside every milestone, every email where Karen tried to take credit for my work, every client who specifically asked for me by name. I scrolled through screenshots, dashboard metrics, sales charts, pipeline reports, proof I'd led the region 6 quarters straight. I took a slow sip of wine and stared at the glowing screen. This wasn't about revenge. It was about value mine and my team's. We had built something real, something Karen clearly didn't understand. And now, she thought she could just erase it. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. What if we built something better? By midnight, I had a working business plan. By 2 a.m., I'd settled on a name, Red Birch Strategies. At sunrise, I had a website template and a mission, one built on integrity, not ego. 3 days later, we met at my place. I'd invited the 6 people who had helped me land the FederalLogic deal: Tom, Aisha, Jake, Ron, Lena, and Marcus. "I'm starting a firm," I told them, "but I'm not asking you to quit. Not unless this is your choice." There was a long pause. Then Tom said, "What's the timeline? Because my resignation letter is ready to go." One by one, they nodded. They were in. We spent the next hour planning our exit. Quiet, clean by the book. No client stealing, no drama. "What about FederalLogic?" Marcus asked. "They've been calling me nonstop," I said, cracking a small smile. "I've got coffee with their CTO tomorrow. I wasn't stealing anyone. I was just catching up with an old friend who managed a $2 million budget." At the cafe, Diane, FederalLogic's CTO, looked frustrated. "They put some junior rep on our account. He didn't even know our API stack." I kept my voice calm. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Don't be sorry. Be our solution," she said flatly. "We signed because of you. We're invoking the opt-out clause." She handed me a business card, her legal counsel. I stared down at it. This was moving even faster than I expected. "So," Diane said, folding her hands on the cafe table, "when can you launch? Because we want to be your first client." I couldn't stop the grin that tugged at my lips. "Actually," I said, Red Birch Strategies is already live. She raised an eyebrow. You don't waste time. I want to be clear. I added I didn't leave to steal clients. Diane laughed softly. You didn't steal anyone. We're choosing you. The following Monday, every one of my core team, Tom, Lena, Jake, Aisha, Marcus, and Ron, submitted formal resignations. No drama, no gossip, just 2 weeks' notice and clean exits. I imagine Karen's reaction when HR handed her 6 envelopes. Her entire FederalLogic account team gone in one day. I was working from my dining table, currently serving as Red Birch HQ, when Marcus called. It's chaos, he whispered. Karen screaming at HR. Jake said she tried to revoke our access immediately, but IT wouldn't do it. No transition plan in place. Stay calm, I told him. Professional and quiet. That's our edge? He chuckled. You should see the Slack threads. Everyone's asking questions. And get this. The CEOs called an emergency meeting. I blinked. The CEO, not Karen, nope. Word is, FederalLogic just submitted the refund request. I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding. The pieces were moving faster than I could have hoped, and I hadn't forced a single one. The next 2 weeks were a blur. I filed the LLC open business accounts and finalized insurance. My apartment overflowed with laptops, legal pads, and whiteboards. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. When my team's last day at the old company came, they walked out with their heads high. And the very next morning, they walked into my living room now. Employees of Red Birch. Jake launched our CRM system. Aisha finished our first pitch deck. We were small, scrappy, and determined. Then came the text I'd been waiting for from an old colleague still inside. FederalLogic refund processed. $2 million hole in quarterly revenue. Emergency board meeting called. I exhaled slowly and smiled. I hadn't stolen a thing. I hadn't broken a rule. I just built something better, and the client chose to follow. The text came from a number I didn't recognize. This is Michael Hargrove, board member at your former employer. We need to talk. An hour later, I was seated across from him in a quiet cafe in downtown St. Paul, a familiar hum of espresso machines in the background. Michael stirred his coffee slowly. If this chapter moved, you don't forget to subscribe to the channel because the next part of the story is where things get even more powerful, and I'd love for you to be right there with me when it unfolds. Let me get this straight, he said. You closed the biggest deal in the company's history. FederalLogic, and Karen fired you 3 hours later. I nodded, keeping my voice even. That's correct. And then your entire team quit within 2 weeks. They made their own decisions, I said. And now FederalLogic has canceled their contract and is working with your new company instead? I met his eyes. They exercised the 90-day opt-out clause I built into the agreement. Karen signed off on it. He leaned back, brows furrowed, visibly processing. The board had no clue until the quarterly revenue tanked. Karen said you were let go due to performance issues. I pulled out my phone and handed it to him. Sales dashboards, year-end reports, client feedback, all showing I was the top regional performer for 6 straight quarters. I brought in 43% of new business last year, I said flatly. Michael rubbed his temples. This is worse than we thought. Karen's got some explaining to do. That's between you and her, I said, rising to leave. I've got a company to build, and we were building it. Red Birch Strategies was growing faster than I ever imagined. By the end of the first month, we'd moved from my apartment into a modest office space near the riverfront. Small, but it was ours. FederalLogic signed a new contract, $2.5 million this time with a long-term commitment. Word traveled fast. My LinkedIn was lighting up with former clients and curious recruiters. During a strategy meeting, my phone buzzed again. A message from Lena. Karen just got grilled in the board meeting. She couldn't explain the revenue crash or why your whole team left. CEOs livid. I locked my phone and turned back to the whiteboard. We were mapping out our growth plan. That mess. Not my story anymore. After the meeting, Tom lingered. Seen this? He held up a tablet showing an industry newsletter. Executive shakeup. Karen Whitmore taking temporary leave to focus on strategic initiatives. I smirked. Translation. She's out. Good, he said. Now let's go win our next deal. We just hired 4 new team members and moved into a larger space overlooking the Mississippi River. Our reputation was growing fast. FederalLogic had already referred us to 2 other government agencies looking for similar integrations. I was reviewing our Q2 numbers, already profitable, which is rare for a company only a few months old, when my phone rang. Unknown number. "Is this Aaron Maddox?" the voice asked. It took me a second to place it. It was David Langston, my former CEO at Crestlight Technologies. We hadn't spoken since the day I was fired. "Yes," I said cautiously. "This is Aaron." "We need to talk," he replied. "In person." The next evening, I met him at a quiet Italian restaurant downtown. I'd spent the night before wondering what his angle was. Legal threats, corporate apology tour, a buyout attempt. He was already seated, looking older, thinner. Stress suited him poorly. "Thank you for coming," he said, rising. "I owe you an apology." I said nothing. "Karen's gone," he continued after we ordered. "The board voted to terminate her last week. We've lost 3 more major accounts since you left." I kept my face neutral. "She undermined top talent," he admitted. "Not just you. Anyone she felt threatened by." "That's unfortunate," I said carefully, still not giving him much. Then he leaned in. "I want you to come back. As our new VP of Sales and Client Success. Full control of your department. Equity. Executive seat." I blinked. "You're offering me Karen's job. A better version?" he said. "And we'd like to acquire Red Birch Strategies. Your team would all have positions." I studied him. He meant it. But why would I sell a thriving business I built from scratch in just 3 months? Because together, we could scale faster, he said, reading my expression. "And honestly, we're bleeding clients and need someone who can stop it." I nodded, promised to consider, though I already knew the answer. "They want to buy us." Tom asked at the emergency team meeting I called that night. Yes, I confirmed, very generous terms. "But it's still Crestlight," Aisha said. "The same people who threw us away?" "Not exactly," I replied. "Karen's out, but the question hanging in the air was louder than any of us wanted to ask. What's our future worth?" "David may have learned his lesson," Tom said, "but I still don't trust it." "He's just trying to stop the bleeding," Lena added, arms folded. I looked around at the team we'd built, 7 of us, who once sat shoulder to shoulder in my living room with nothing but laptops, takeout containers, and a shared sense of purpose. Now we had 20 employees, a real office, and 6 months' worth of whiteboard plans, new clients, new hires, new service offerings. "I think we stay independent," Jake said quietly. "We're building something special here." One by one, heads nodded in agreement. Red Birch wasn't just a company. It was proof that what we believed in, transparency, collaboration, integrity, could actually work. We'd built it out of the wreckage of being underestimated. Why give that away? The next morning I called David. "We're flattered," I told him. "But we're staying independent." There was a long silence. I figured you might say that he finally replied. "Could we at least explore a strategic partnership now that I was open to?" 6 months after getting fired, I stood at the podium of the Twin Cities Business Awards accepting the Emerging Company of the Year trophy. Red Birch had grown faster than I'd dreamed. We'd moved again, this time into a full-floor downtown windows overlooking the river. Our client roster now included federal agencies, tech startups, and even a Fortune 100 company. Success is the best revenge, people say. But this wasn't revenge. It was something more lasting, more grounded. "This award belongs to my entire team," I said into the mic. "People who believed in a dream when all we had was a dining room table and a pitch deck." From the stage, I caught sight of David in the back row. Crestlight had been nominated for an innovation award. They didn't win. Their stock had slipped again after 2 consecutive missed quarters. After the ceremony, he approached me. "Congratulations," he said, and I believed he meant it. "You've built something remarkable." "Thank you," I replied. We stood in silence before he added, "That partnership's been good for both of us." He was right. They sent us clients they couldn't handle. We handled projects they never could. A year in Red Birch was no longer a bet. It was a force, and we were just getting started. I hadn't thought about Karen in months until I saw the LinkedIn notification, "Karen Whitmore viewed your profile." Last I'd heard, she was struggling to land another executive role. Too many questions around her abrupt leave of absence from Crestlight. Out of curiosity, I clicked through. She'd rebranded herself as a leadership consultant, which, let's be honest, is often just polished code for between jobs. Her endorsement section was nearly blank. The silence said everything. A knock on my office door pulled me back. FederalLogic's team is here for the Q2 review, Lena said. I closed the tab. Karen was the past. Red Birch was the future. I grabbed my tablet and walked down the hallway to the glass conference room where Diane and her team were waiting. Ready to talk about expanding the contract, I asked, with a smile. Later that day, I sat down with a journalist from Tech Midwest Weekly who was profiling Red Birch. Is it true you're planning an IPO? She asked, leaning in. I laughed. We're only 18 months old, but we are preparing for a Series A round to accelerate growth. The working title of the piece made me chuckle, Red Birch Rising. How Aaron Maddox built a $15 million firm from a pink slip. Dramatic, sure, but not wrong. After the interview, I checked my calendar. I had coffee scheduled with Michael Hargrove, the former Crestlight board member who'd reached out months ago. He was now a VC scouting investments. You've done what most founders only dream about, he told me as we sat down. Built a profitable company with no outside capital. We've grown at the speed of revenue, I replied. Kept things lean. Intentional. He smiled. Exactly why my firm wants to lead your Series A. No wild expectations. Just fuel for what's already working. Why us specifically? I watched your old company spiral without you, he said, and I watched you build something better. We closed the $10 million round on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, the press release was live. My phone blew up. But the most unexpected call came from David Langston. Congratulations, he said. Huge milestone. Thank you, I said sincerely. Then came the pause. I have to ask. We just lost another VP of sales. Would you ever consider coming back? I couldn't help it. I laughed. David, I said I just closed a $10 million funding round to expand Red Birch. Why would I come back now? He let out a breath. Can't blame me for asking. Your replacement didn't work out. Neither did the one after her. Truth is, we never recovered after losing you. And your team. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt, but it passed. I remembered sitting across from Karen and HR being handed termination papers just hours after landing the biggest deal of my career. I can recommend a great recruiter, I told him, keeping it professional. After we hung up, I sat in my office watching the Minneapolis skyline. The thought hit me, if Karen had backed me instead of pushing me out, if Crestlight had recognized what we'd built. Maybe they'd still be thriving. But then Red Birch wouldn't exist. Sometimes rejection isn't punishment, it's direction. 2 years after I was fired, we took the Red Birch team on a retreat to celebrate a major milestone, $20 million in annual revenue. What started with 7 of us now had grown into over 100 employees. Our client list, a who's who of government healthcare and enterprise tech. On the final night around a bonfire at a lakeside resort, Jake raised his glass. To Erin, who turned her worst day into the best decision she ever made. Everyone cheered. I felt a lump rise in my throat as I looked around the circle. These were the people who believed in a vision that started on my living room floor. Later that night, scrolling my phone, a headline made me pause. Crestlight Technologies announces major restructuring. They were laying off 30% of their staff after being acquired by a larger firm. I locked my phone and walked back to the firelight. That wasn't my story anymore. The next morning, as we checked out, the resort manager stopped me. Ms. Maddox, someone left this for you. It was a handwritten note. You were right. I was wrong. Congratulations on your success. Karen actually sent that, Aisha asked as we drove home. I nodded. Does it feel like payback? I thought for a long moment. No, I said softly. It feels like closure. Karen's message ended simply. No response necessary. Just wanted to acknowledge your achievement. I stared at it for a long time. 2 years ago, it would have felt like triumph. Now, it just felt like closure. After a pause, I typed back, thank you for the note. I hope you're well. Short, professional, human. We didn't need to be friends. We didn't need to relive the past, but we could acknowledge each other's growth. Her reply came within minutes. I am well. Thank you. Different, but better. Sometimes the most painful endings lead to the most unexpected evolutions. As we approached Red Birch's 3rd anniversary, we were featured in Fortune's companies to watch. The photo shoot happened right in our new office, 3 full floors in a Minneapolis high-rise. How does it feel to be a success story? The photographer asked as he adjusted his lighting. Like we're just getting started, I replied. The truth. Success felt both more satisfying and less important than I'd expected. More satisfying because it brought real freedom. Less important because I finally understood the journey. Building something with people I trusted was the reward. A knock on my door interrupted the moment. Aaron, FederalLogic is on the line, Lena said. I smiled. Our very first client. That original $2 million deal. It had grown into a $15 million annual partnership. As I picked up the phone, my eyes landed on a photo by my desk, the original team. 7 of us squeezed around my dining table, laptops open full of belief. Hi, Diane, I said warmly. Let's talk next steps. That afternoon, the email came. A tech giant wanted to acquire Red Birch for $200 million. I stared at the screen for a full 5 minutes before calling an emergency leadership meeting. That's a lot of money, Tom said, wide-eyed. It's not about the money, I replied. It's about our mission, our independence. Would we still run things, Aisha asked. They're promising autonomy. For 3 years, I said. But you know how that usually goes. We debated late into the night. The offer would make all of us wealthy, especially our early team who had equity. But we all knew what was on the line: control of something we'd built from nothing. The next morning, I picked up the phone and called the CEO of the tech firm that had offered to buy us. We're flattered, I told him. But Red Birch Strategies isn't for sale. We're committed to staying independent. Name your price, he said, without missing a beat. Everyone has a number. I smiled even though he couldn't see it. It's not about the number. It's about the vision. But if you're interested in a strategic partnership, let's talk. After I hung up, I took a slow walk through the office. Laughter in the conference room. Whiteboards full of product notes. People building something that mattered. Some things are worth more than millions. At our next all-hands, I stood at the front of the room and made the announcement. We're opening a London office. The room erupted. 3.5 years after we launched from my dining table in St. Paul, Red Birch was going global. My phone buzzed during the celebration. A text from David Langston. Crestlight is shutting down. Just thought you should hear it from me. My old company being absorbed into a holding firm. The brand, the legacy gone. I felt an odd wave of sadness. Not for Karen, not even for how I was treated, but for what could have been. A good company undone by ego and short-sighted leadership. Later, Tom found me in my office. You all right? You seem off. I showed him the message. He sat across from me quietly. You know that wasn't your fault, right? I know, I said. Still, a lot of good people worked there, including us. He nodded. But now we're building something better. Then he hesitated. A few of our old teammates are looking. Thought maybe we could. I smiled. Send me their resumes. Red Birch was built for second chances. 4 years to the day after I was fired, I stood on stage at the National Innovation Conference giving a keynote on resilience and reinvention. Rejection. I told the crowd can be a beginning disguised as an ending. As the applause filled the room, my eyes scanned the audience. There in the back row was Karen, older, smaller, watching silently. After the speech, she approached me, humbled, quiet. That was powerful, she said. And this time, I believed her. Thank you for not mentioning me by name, Karen said quietly. I nodded. This was never about you. She gave a sad smile. I know that now. I was insecure, threatened by your success. I thought pushing you down would somehow raise me up. She paused, then added, I was wrong. We all make mistakes, I replied. The real question is whether we learn from them. I did, she said softly. Too late for Crestlight, but not too late for me. She handed me a business card. I started a leadership coaching practice, she said, focused on supporting people instead of fearing them. Your story helped me find my way back. 5 years after I was fired, Red Birch Strategies had grown beyond anything I could have imagined. We had offices in 12 countries, over 500 employees, and annual revenue approaching $100 million. And still on my desk, I kept the framed photo of those first 7 teammates crammed around my dining table day one. There was a knock at the door. "Got a minute?" Jake asked. "Always," I said, smiling. Jake, my first hire, was now our global VP of sales. "That tech giant that tried to buy us 2 years ago," he said, "they're back. This time, the offer's $500 million, and I let out a low whistle. $500 million. Jake nodded. "That's walk away forever money for all of us." I turned toward the window, taking in the Minneapolis skyline. "Schedule a leadership meeting. We'll talk as a team." That night, sleep didn't come easy. I kept replaying that moment in the Crestlight conference room, Karen's stiff posture, the HR director's awkward silence, the white envelope sliding across the table. If she hadn't fired me, I'd still be there, building someone else's dream. Instead, I built my own. The next day, the leadership team gathered. The meeting ran 6 hours. "We could do so much with their resources," said Tommy. "But we'd lose our identity," Lena countered. "What about an IPO?" Marcus suggested. "We keep control, but raise capital." I listened as they all spoke. This wasn't just my company anymore. Red Birch belonged to all of us. Finally, Lena asked the question we'd all been circling around. "Aaron, what do you want?" I looked around the table. These weren't just colleagues, they were my family. People who had built this dream, brick by brick, beside me. "I want Red Birch to outlive us all," I said quietly. "I want our work to matter. I want to grow, but never at the cost of who we are." In the end, we declined the $500 million acquisition offer. Instead, we began preparing for something much harder and much more ours, an IPO. That night, I opened my leather-bound journal and wrote, 5 years ago, I was fired for being too successful. Today, I turned down $500 million to protect something more valuable, our freedom. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building something so undeniable they have to recognize what they threw away. 2 months later, headlines spread across every major outlet. Red Birch Strategies goes public, valuation tops $1 billion. A unicorn born out of rejection. Standing at the New York Stock Exchange, ringing the opening bell, I looked to my left and saw the original team beside me. Tom, Jake, Lena, Marcus, Aisha, and Wei. 6 people who took the leap with me from a dining room in St. Paul to the biggest financial stage in the world. At the celebration lunch that afternoon, Wei raised his glass to Aaron, who turned a pink slip into a billion-dollar rocket ship. I shook my head, lifting mine in return. To all of us, Red Birch isn't my company, it's our company. We made this together. Later that evening, alone in my hotel room, I opened my laptop. There was an email draft I'd been staring at for days. To Karen Whitmore. Subject, no subject, dear Karen. As Red Birch goes public today, I just wanted to say thank you. Not for firing me, that was still wrong, but for creating the push that made me find my true path. Sometimes the worst moments become the clearest mirrors. I hope you found your path too. I hovered, then hit send. Not out of triumph, but out of closure. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told you were too much, then you know how it feels to have your worth questioned. I was fired for being too successful, too driven, too outspoken, too unwilling to shrink. But I didn't let that moment define me. I built something better, and I did it with people who believed in me. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment. Share your thoughts, your moments of resilience, or your own rebirth. Let's uplift each other. And remember, sometimes the worst day of your career is just the beginning of your real legacy.